Entering the Pat Mayo Experience.
Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings Week 10 Rankings. Debate by position. You want a position, you hit the time codes, or hit the description, and you can find the hot links to the list of rankings, which will be updated every single morning and right before each of the lock of each of the games. Primetime, Munich morning, because we have a Munich game this week, and then the regular slate. And then we'll be all good to go. Smash the like to the episode, sub to Mayo Media Network, obviously, and sub to the podcast. While you're here as well, the Pat Mayo Experience DraftKings Listeners League. I don't have the link yet. Hopefully, I get that by the end of the show, and I will plop it down in the description. $15 to play, 3 max entry. And if you want to make your own projections, it's easy. runthesims.com/mayo to get yourself that 10% off and get all the tools to help you succeed. Jake Ciely from theathletic.com is on the line. Feeling under the weather. I myself know all about that. I have 2 little kids. They get sick. They recover. And then like 4 days later, my wife and I are just like, oh my God, what has just hit us? It's the worst.
So that's what, should I just blame it on Nicole's kid who came to visit from Washington? It's his fault. That's
Yes.
what it is. It's kids. It's always the kids.
Always the kids.
By the way, at first I thought you said the Munich game. And I was like, whoa, did I miss something about football this week?
Oh boy, that'd be a tough scene if it was all unit games. Yeah, you have to start number 1 Varys from Game of Thrones, and you'd be good to go.
Wow. Yeah, that was good.
Well, let's talk running backs. Get into it. I have Austin Eckler at number 1, even with the returning Christian McCaffrey, who was at number 2. Did you hear? I saw that Elijah Mitchell's being designated to return from injured reserve. What kind of role do you think that he'll have in that San Francisco backfield? Do you think it really affects McCaffrey all that much? Because I don't. But I would say the return of Debo might affect him a little bit.
Nah, I really don't expect either return to do much to him. I really just think Elijah Mitchell's back to being one of the primary handcuffs, similar like Jeff Wilson was before he got traded off this team. Now it's just back to Elijah Mitchell, which tells you that they probably felt pretty good about Elijah Mitchell coming off the now designated to return, as you said. So I'm not worried about Christian McCaffrey at all. I actually have Christian McCaffrey number 1, but I mean, that's nitpicking. I don't really care. So that's how little concern I have for it.
Number 3, Derrick Henry into Nick Chubb at number 4. Saquon, Alvin Kamara, even though he had a very poor Monday Night Football game. That's okay. I mean, it's not okay if you had him, but he's number 6 in the rankings at Pittsburgh this week. Much easier matchup. Travis Etienne at number 7. Pollard, that's assuming no Zeke, who did not practice on Monday. We'll see how that goes throughout the rest of the week, but that's where I'd have Pollard if no Zeke. We'll have to reassess here in a second if Zeke does return. Josh Jacobs at number 9 against Indy. Then Ken Walker, number 10 in Munich at, quote, Tampa Bay. But again, that's a neutral site game over in Europe well before the other Sunday games. Let's talk Pollard for a second, though. Let's say Zeke does come back. Where do you think is a proper ranking for both of these guys? And would you put Pollard above Zeke even if both are active?
I think I might still go Pollard barely, because at this point, it's Ezekiel Elliott's been what he's been this year. Is the same as what he was last year. He's touchdown reliant. He's going to get most of the work, even though they both get snaps inside the goal line area, the 10, 5, and 3. Zeke gets the carries. Zeke gets the touches. So I think it'd be very close. I'd probably think that Pollard would fall around. And I'd actually put Pollard right with DeAndre Swift. And then Zeke would kind of be with like Najee Harris and Miles Sanders for your rankings. That's kind of where I would slot them in.
Okay, so let's go to the 11 to 20 range. I have Dalvin Cook at number 11, Jonathan Taylor, more on him in a second, Dameon Pierce, A.J. Dillon, assuming no Aaron Jones in this game, James Conner, Cordero Patterson, Donta Foreman, and that I'm assuming there's no Chuba Hubbard, but even if there is, it's going to be a tough scene. Jamal Williams. It does matter, but maybe it doesn't, though. Because we'll talk about a bunch of these situations then. Jamal Williams at 18, Leonard Fournette at 19, DeAndre Swift, who you mentioned, at number 20. I would still go Pollard ahead of DeAndre Swift with Zeke back at this point.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was saying, at Swift. And then Zeke, I would play over Najee Harris, but I'd also play Miles Sanders over Najee Harris at this point. I think that Liz Frank is legitimately a problem. That burst, any pop he's had behind the line trying to get through that first level is gone this year if you're watching the games. And everybody's like, oh, ooh, this is what we said. Najee Harris isn't that good. Like, yeah, who was saying that last year? Who was sitting there saying, oh, Najee Harris leading the NFL in running back receptions and doing what he was doing last year? He's not that good. He's not that good. Sure. So, yes, Najee Harris is not necessarily one of the top 4 running backs in all the NFL, but he's better than this. But that's why I think it is the Liz Frank injury. Maybe this is like Antonio Gibson from last year, Pat. Remember that, where Antonio Gibson got that brief layoff and everybody's like, wow, he needs a few weeks. And everybody's like, give him a couple weeks, let him get 100%. And then he came back from that brief layoff and it was like, oh, well, that's all he needed. Maybe that's all he needs. And maybe there's a little upside, but until he see it, I'm not ready to play him, even in front of some split backfields. And then if it is terrible as it has been, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing the shift to Jaylen Warren as maybe they think, hey, let's save him for next year, which is, I think, what you may have been alluding to with Jonathan Taylor. Like, if this team is going to go belly up, maybe we stop playing Jonathan Taylor banged up and just look to next year.
That's what I was considering. Let's talk about Taylor first then. Do you think that he actually ends up playing this week?
If you asked me today, I would lean no over yes.
I mean, I'm obviously leaning yes over no, hence why he's in the rankings. But let's pretend he's out. How far does Deion Jackson go up? Because this was something that I talked about a little bit on the Saturday show last week when I did the rankings update, that, yeah, it's great and everything that Deion Jackson had double-digit targets last time that he was thrust into the starting role. That was with Matt Ryan at quarterback. Sam Ehlinger, a lot of the time, I mean, he's significantly worse than Matt Ryan, as it appears, and he's just going to take that ball down and tuck it in and either take a sack or try to run with it rather than trying to dump it off every single time. And that is going to substantially hurt your overall fantasy value. Like, even if it was no Jonathan Taylor, I'm just looking at it right now, like, where would I put him? Maybe I would put him at number 29 behind both Bears running backs.
So part of it too, it's the health of Deion Jackson comes into play as well. He got banged up in that game.
He came back,
then but then he left again and he was done for the rest of the game. Now, maybe that's part of, the injury. Maybe that's part of that he didn't look that good. The game was pretty much out of hand at that point, whatever it might be. I actually had Deion Jackson in the teens and not in the top 12 range because of what you're saying. There's a concern that Ehlinger versus Matt Ryan would hurt him a little bit. The volume would help, but he was getting all the volume. He just wasn't doing very good because the offense wasn't doing very good. There's nothing there. So you look at the Raiders and you say, hey, things should be better this week on paper, but how much better? So I would say if we knew Deion Jackson was 100%, the wonderful trade of Zach Moss, watch him become the lead. I think that Deion Jackson would probably slot in right a little bit at that conversation with Najee Harris and Miles Sanders again for me. And then I'm with you. I'd probably want to go Miles Sanders, would want to go Antonio Gibson. I'd want to go David Montgomery. So that's kind of the range he falls into. And now if he's banged up and all of a sudden we're talking about Wilkins, who first game back with this team stepped right past Philip Lindsay. And I'm assuming Zach Moss gets the chance over Lindsay now too. I mean, they're going to be down by like Darrell Henderson. You might as well consider the Colts backfield the Rams backfield at that point.
Yeah, I have Darrell Henderson at 36 for reference. That's behind two Denver running backs, which I have no idea how do you think that situation shakes out? Because I have Edmonds above, I have Gordon one spot ahead of Edmonds at 34 and 35. Although if you told me that Latavius Murray ended up being the highest scoring running back from this field, I'm not going to be super stunned about that either. I have him further down just based on the profile and game that I would expect him to play this week. That, I don't know, I could see Melvin handling a lot of the carries. Like, he'd be in a split backfield in terms of carries with Latavius Murray, but Chase Edmonds probably still more involved in the receiving game than both of them, but maybe not all the way because he's the new to the team.
Yeah, so I actually think this kind of plays out somewhat like the Commanders. I'd say Latavius Murray is, my opinion, Antonio Gibson, because they were using him as the lead at times, but also somewhat using him in the passing game. I think at this point, Melvin Gordon's kind of fallen into the Brian Robinson role, and they've eliminated his touches outside of like the early downs. Not a lot of passing game work, but that's where the McKissick versus Edmonds role comes into play. So I want to avoid the Denver backfield at all costs. As much as, we want value to come out of these teams, we want to figure out these backfields, but I don't care about the Rams backfield anymore. Don't care about the Broncos. I don't care about the Kansas City Chiefs backfield, even though it is the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't care because you know what? Everybody's involved and I'm not trying to figure it out. The only thing we can hope for there is that they're up and they play Pacheco when they're up, but that's we've seen before. Sometimes they don't get up until the third or fourth quarter, and at that point now you're hoping for a touchdown. Honestly, now with Nyheim Hines in the mix and the Bills, we got another backfield where I really don't want to have to deal with it if all possible. I know some people have to play these guys, but these backfields, all of them, and now including the Colts, if there is no Jonathan Taylor, you got 5 backfields that I would just stay away from at all costs.
I want to circle back to what you said between Najee Harris and Sanders. And I actually gave this one, you'd be shocked, Jake, at me. I gave this one a lot of thought. Between these 3 guys, Najee Harris, Miles Sanders, and Antonio Gibson, 24, 25, and 26. The reason that I have Harris over Sanders, and I think objectively you're right, Sanders looks better in this situation than Harris does, especially against the opponent. Like, yeah, the New Orleans run defense is pretty good, as we even saw on Monday night. Until the fourth quarter, they were very good at limiting what was going on the ground. I just still think at this point in time, coming off of a bye, maybe there's a bit of a recharge from Najee Harris. Maybe he can get more involved in the receiving game because, frankly, I mean, Pickett was put in mid-season and, like, hell, mid-game. And, yeah, they've been able to implement what they want to do. Maybe during the bye week, they can take over more of an offense that features Harris a little bit more in conjunction with Kenny Pickett. And then you have the Sanders situation where it's still going to be a split no matter what, whether it's between him and Hurts or him and Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell, who, hey, good shouts to us for Kenneth Gainwell last week. That one actually worked out and read that game properly. But Washington has like the best run defense in football, man. It's really good. So I just worry that his efficiency might not be at its peak for his limited touches. I don't think that he's going to get 15 or more carries. And he doesn't do anything in the receiving game, really, because Hurts doesn't check down all that often. So I think baseline-wise, yeah, if you're playing like ultimate upside, Sanders is probably the better play. But I think if you're just looking for like your median outcome, like you're between the bell, like the high end of the bell curve, you're looking at Najee Harris this week in half point.
Yeah, I get everything you're saying there. Part of me wants to see what he looks like too. I mean, I referenced and even said that we saw Antonio Gibson last year, speaking of Washington, and came out and all of a sudden looks a little bit better. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it is. But, even with Najee Harris getting some of the passing game work, it just still hasn't even been clicked. Oh, what is he getting? Like 6 catches for 16 yards sometimes or something ridiculous like that. So I don't disagree with anything you said. I just have some hesitancy of whether or not I want to use Najee Harris unless I'm forced to. But the thing is a lot of people who drafted Najee Harris probably don't have that choice anyway, unless they went crazy on the waiver wire and got some pickups, because you're probably almost forced to start Najee Harris still.
Let's talk about Dolphins. Jeff Wilson outsnaps Raheem Mostert 51% to 45%. Do you think this is going to be the plan in this backfield? Is it going to be Wilson slightly over Mostert, or is this going to be a coin flip every week?
I think it'll be pretty close every single week, honestly. I think this is now, we've referenced it for a few other backfields throughout this season because the NFL is a copycat league, but this is now looking like we've been saying, oh, this team is like the Broncos. This team is like the Broncos. This team is like the Broncos. This one with the offense and how it's working, because yes, the Broncos offense last year passing wise wasn't that great, but the backfield was. It was every single week. You could just go ahead and start Williams and Melvin Gordon. And at the end of the year, they both finished top 20 running backs. You don't want to have to do it, but necessarily if you have Mostert and Jeff Wilson, and they're your 2 and 3, I'd start both of them. This is now looking at with how good Miami is, with how good Miami is with Tua, this offense clicking with these options at wide receiver. I'd start both running backs. So I don't have a problem that they're sharing. It definitely moves Raheem Mostert from being a fringe RB1 to an RB2, but I think they're both RB2s going forward, and I'm okay with both.
So do you think that I have them misranked then? Because I have Jeff Wilson at number 22, and I have Mostert at 32. Should Wilson be back a little bit more and Mostert up a little bit?
I don't know if I would push Jeff Wilson back that much. It's more so I would bring up Mostert similar to, I mean, it's very much like you have Montgomery and Herbert back to back for the Bears. I'd probably almost have Wilson and Mostert back to back, but a few names in between them. So yeah, I would have Mostert more up by, I mean, I'd play Mostert over Khalil Herbert, and I love Khalil Herbert, but the Bears, that's the one we can't predict in a given week. It's like they used them 50-50 2 weeks ago, and they both look great, and they both have good games. And then this past week, all of a sudden, it's back to Montgomery 80% of the time. Like, there's no rhyme or reason for the Bears with that backfield.
Yeah, so I'll move Mostert to 29.
I even tried to look. I I even looked. I was like, okay, maybe it's the Bears when they have bad matchups. It's more Herbert or more Montgomery, or maybe it's when there's legitimately nothing you can find with the Bears for some reason that says it's when they're down, it's when it's a bad matchup, it's with everything. So yeah, I would play Mostert over.
Were you surprised at how much James Conner played over Eno Benjamin?
No, I think that James Conner coming back finally healthy. Benjamin had the one good game. I mean, outside of that, he's been kind of more missed than hit. So I think we know about Benjamin, or at least what we were saying. Benjamin's not a lead bell cow running back. Darrell Williams, that's why you even mentioned it last week that Darrell Williams was a threat to get sprinkled in because Benjamin just isn't that good. So I wasn't that surprised on James Conner. I had James Conner. I don't think he was definitely inside my top 20. I know he's like a fringe RB2 for me last week. So I thought he'd be right back into the mix. The same thing with Cordell Patterson, Pat. We talk about it a lot. When the replacement is doing pretty good or even great, actually with Cordell Patterson, the players had been great because Atlanta was winning games and Algier and Caleb Huntley were doing things. Benjamin had been hit and miss, but once these guys come back and they activate them to get them right back out there, it's full go unless the replacements are terrible. The replacement, like, this week, you go back to the Jonathan Taylor conversation. This brings this into the conversation. Like, Jonathan Taylor has limited practice all week. We definitely don't know that he's going to be unleashed as a bell cow because his replacements haven't been that good. So that's where the differentiator lies.
So do you think I should knock Taylor down then? I have him at number 12. Like, would you play Dameon Pierce over him?
That's a tough pill to swallow, but I think I might, and I would go A.J. Dillon with no Aaron Jones over Jonathan Taylor.
There's no way walking boot Aaron Jones is going to play, right?
Everything came back clean. I don't know. Like, it could just be a protective walking boot.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, I mean, it is just to make sure that, like, you don't do more damage. And now that they found out everything's clean, maybe he's fine. I don't know. Jonathan Taylor's playing through, he didn't play last week, but he was playing through what they were thinking is a mid-ankle sprain at least. Saquon Barkley played through a mid-ankle sprain almost the entire second half of the season last year.
Yeah, but you have to remember, the Colts were supposed to be pretty crappy after the first few weeks. All the metrics pointed to them being awful, yet they started tying games. They beat the Chiefs. So the Colts are now actively going out of their way to sabotage any goodwill and any chance that they have to win. I mean, they have a good coach. They fire him, or at least an okay coach, for a guy who's never coached before. They sit Matt Ryan, who, although he was pretty terrible and really very generous in his turnovers to the other team, they start him for a guy who is barely a quarterback, and it seems like they might just sit out Taylor. Like, no, he's too good. We need to get him on the bench. We're trying to get a real quarterback for next year. We need to be at the top of the draft.
And exactly, that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier, is that you just stop playing him at this point. And the same thing is, I don't think the Steelers are there yet, but if Najee Harris is, like, you do think you have a franchise running back, at least for his rookie contract until it plays out, like, why risk him the rest of the year when you know you're out of it? I mean, for all intents and purposes, the Steelers are already out of it, just as much as the Colts are. It's the same conversation I brought up to you last week with Josh Jacobs. It's the Raiders. They're out of it. Like, at what point do they say, you know what? Sure, we could run Josh Jacobs into the ground, but doing so actually gives us a pretty good chance of winning games. So maybe we start to seed some more carries to Zamir White and evaluate him for next year. It's like, there are little concerns where, and I'm bringing this up for trade reasons. If Taylor does play this week and looks any good at all, same thing with Najee Harris. Those three running backs, if you could sell them high right now or after this week, I would before the trade deadline hits.
Any other running backs that you want to make mention of? Backups? Isn't it odd that Jerick McKinnon is playing all these snaps yet doing nothing fantasy relevant?
I mean, it was McKissick before he got hurt and missed games. It's just the way that the Chiefs backfield is. I go back to it. It's like Pacheco, if you believe it's going to be a blowout and then you think he's going to he should. The way that they've kind of been using him is going to it's kind of the James Cook situation, but he's quote unquote the lead where James Cook was the second option before they made that trade. And speaking to bring up that backfield and go back to what I said earlier, to bring up the Bills backfield, whether or not Josh Allen plays this week, that's another one. I'd play Singletary. I'd still go Singletary, but I'm not trying to play Nyheim Hines, and I'm definitely not going for James Cook, even if we think they're going to blow him out this week.
Donta Foreman was the last one that I wanted to talk about on Thursday Night Football. Yes. I don't think that his role is going to change whatsoever, even with Hubbard coming back. I think that he'll still be the number one, and whatever he was losing to Blackshear and whoever the hell the other guy who got the touchdown was against the Bengals, like if they get into a deficit, he's going to be fantasy. I don't want to say that. He's just going to be very bad, put it that way. Like he's going to be unusable. Right. But I don't expect them to be down 21 in the first quarter against the Falcons. Maybe they will be. I don't expect that to happen. So I would imagine that he probably gets his 15-plus carries on the ground if this matchup stays close, and the other guys don't really do much.
Right, but what you said is his role is not going to change. Is what some people might not realize is that the past 2 weeks, and it happened 2 weeks in a row. I brought it up to you last week. Chuba Hubbard didn't play, so it didn't end up coming to fruition. But it did. His play, his box score did matter for what happened. Is that they're just not using him in the. You actually were the one that even took what I said and said they're going to play roles, and whoever the lead is the lead role. That's not very much used in the passing game. That's exactly what they did. So Chuba Hubbard coming back, all it does is keep Foreman in his role, but as you said, the role is what people are missing here, is that the role is not a bell cow. So if something happens where Atlanta gets a turnover or they continue to run and get easy touchdowns in their first two drives, and all of a sudden it is 17-0, even 17-0 at the half, 17-3, you might see very little of Foreman if Hubbard is playing. Even if not, it'll be Blackshear a little bit. So that's the concern that people should have for Foreman. Ideally, if the Panthers were the ones to get up 13-17-0 or something like that, then Deonta Foreman could have a huge game. So that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, essentially you're just hedging, like the hedge that you have here, and like even the ranking, I have him inside the top 20. I don't think that you can sit him based on this matchup. It is the best matchup you can have.
Yeah, and that's probably the best they're going to have the rest of the season.
Oh, for sure. He's going to get his 6 touchdowns against the Falcons and do nothing else.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wide receiver rankings for Week 10. I got Kupp, Tyreek, Jefferson, Adams, Hopkins, Waddle, A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, Stefan Diggs, Amari Cooper. The Diggs ranking is more of an indictment of whether Allen plays or not. Maybe he'll go back to a great connection with Case Keenum. I mean, this would unlock a Case Keenum revenge game against the Vikings, by the way, if Josh Allen doesn't go. But if Josh Allen plays, like he's not 100%. And we saw him try to throw in like the final quarter against the Jets, and he was just off. Like he didn't have the same sort of arm strength anymore.
Yeah, that's concerning. But of course, it's not enough to knock Stefan Diggs down that far. It does put a little bit of concern on top of Gabe Davis, who, as you mentioned, that's exactly what saw a lot of Gardner last week and kind of ruined that game for him. The one is as crazy as it sounds, and Rich Rebar was the one that pointed it out. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I would not have Amari Cooper there. There's no explanation for it. Like, there's no reason this should be the truth. But the truth is, Amari Cooper's only good at home. Amari Cooper only scores touchdowns at home, only gets double-digit scores at home. On the road, it's been all Donovan Peoples-Jones. And Amari Cooper has terrible games. It's basically Jared Goff at home versus Jared Goff on the road. It's just insane because there's no reason for it. There's no reason that Amari Cooper should be so much better at home. Similar to Ben Roethlisberger 4 years ago, whatever that one season was, where it was the ridiculous splits that he had, because it's outdoors. So it's not like, oh, he's only better on a track. And there's nothing here, but for whatever reason it is, Amari Cooper stinks on the road.
Yeah, I mean, he's only played 3 games on the road, and his last performance against Baltimore wasn't horrible by any means. Like, if he's going to give you 3 for if his bad game is 3 for 74, I think that you'll take that. So he really hasn't had a bad game since at Atlanta when they lost 23-20, and then the opening game of the season when he still had 6 targets in that game. I mean, the Atlanta game was just really weird because they decided, hey, we can just run the ball at will. I'm not concerned about this because Miami's defense is so bad that I just want to start whoever against them.
No, you're definitely right about that. And I was just throwing out there to say, like, what could it be? It is terrible, and you do look for a shootout. But, I'd still go Lamb, St. Brown, Olave over. That's the difference. I would just have Cooper down there with Chris Godwin. It's like 3 or 4 spots. It's not a big drop.
All right, I'm content with keeping Amari at number 10 here. You mentioned the other name, CD at number 11, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave. I'm guessing Jarvis Landry is going to be back this week, but what do I know? Because the guy's might never play again. I thought he was going to play on Monday night.
I know. Well, we was about. Well, she's going to get the surgery with Michael Thomas to be done for the year all of a sudden. Yeah, and I'm not that concerned about Jarvis Landry if he's out there. I included him in the waiver column. And people were like, "Well, if Jarvis Landry isn't rostered in my league, what do you?" I was like, "I don't care because you know who he is. He's Zay Jones at this point. Are you that excited about Zay Jones? That's who Jarvis Landry is. You might get 6 for 70, and you might get 3 for 20, and maybe sprinkles in a touchdown here or there, but." If you need him, you need him. But, I mean, where do you have him? You have Jarvis Landry down by, Hunter Renfrow and Michael Gallup. That's where he should be. Like, you're that excited? I'd easily go for Gallup over both of them just on the upside alone, even though it hasn't hit yet. I would just go for it's what you always say, Pat. If I'm down in this range, I'm playing for the guy who might get me 20, and Landry and Renfrow aren't doing that.
Yeah, it sucks about Renfrow. I guess Adams really did destroy his career. Him and Mac Hollins, that evil Mac Hollins.
It's more that. Like, because, there was like, hey, Darren Waller's not going to, and I'm ringing in a conversation to say I agree with you. Darren Waller, I was down on as in, I think I had him tight end 6 or 7. He wasn't down that far for me, but my biggest argument was like, hey, Hunter Renfrow is not going to disappear from this team. And he kind of has, but what you just said, it wasn't because of Waller and it wasn't because they don't want to use Renfrow. It's not so much Devontae. It's been Mac Hollins that ruined everything. Like, who would have thought Mac Hollins came? He wasn't even the one that they thought might be the number 2 for this team.
Who do they think was going to be the number 2? Keelan Cole?
That's what I mean. Renfrow. No, Renfrow. Run, and then like Mac Hollins was going to be the 4th option behind those two and Darren Waller.
Yeah. Life comes at you fast. And Waller's been hurt the entire year.
I know. I feel bad. Like, I had a lot of Hunter Renfrow. I don't anymore. I dropped him a few weeks ago.
Well, it's funny. I had a decision in my keeper league whether to keep Renfrow or keep Elijah Moore. And fortunately, I took Renfrow. Not that it matters.
It's a lose. Yeah, it's a lose on that one because Elijah Moore. Did you see the highlight somebody put out? Is Elijah Moore highlight from week 9, and it was the 3 plays he ran in motion before the snap, and that was it.
It's funny because when we were watching the game, I was like, man, they gotta have Elijah Moore doing stuff this game because he was like running back and forth across the formation. Just go get your cardio in, pal. You'll be good to go. Who else do I got in here? So Olave, Godwin at number 14, Debo, who I expect to return at number 15. Metcalf, Judy, Lockett, Christian Kirk. Someone did point out to me that when Marv and Zay Jones are both on the field, Christian Kirk has just been a lot better this year. It just allows him to play the slot, and he's good to go. McLaurin at number 20. I put all my prop stock into Heineke over passing yardage last week, Jake. That did not turn out well for me.
That's the risk with Heineke is that like even when he goes crazy and has a decent day for the team, it doesn't necessarily mean the yards are there with him. Which, speaking of which, when we get to quarterbacks, I have an interesting one we should talk about. But I think Terry McLaurin, you could argue, should be higher, but not this week against the Eagles. This feels like the Tyler Heineke 110 yards and 3 interception type of game, just being insanely reckless.
Or
and I like
or the 4 touchdown 4 pick game and Washington somehow wins.
Yeah, wouldn't that? How many people have Philadelphia still available in their Survivor and are just hammering them this week?
I saw someone in the big circuit contest ended up they had 6 entries left in like the $1 million top prize one. They used the Bills in all of them.
Oh my God.
I couldn't imagine. I mean, I don't want to critique any sort of Survivor strategy, someone who's been out since week 3, but I would, if I had 6 entries left with very few people left, I probably would have like not evenly distributed. I would have done like 3 of the Bills and then, give myself some options here.
Yeah. Even 4. I mean, one of the, like if you read Survivor Pick, this is why, because if you're at this point, yes, you're surviving, but at this point when you're trying to win the entire thing, you're also hedging the field. And the field was so heavily on Buffalo that, yeah, you should have at least taken a dart throw or 2. But again, like you, I've been out since, what is it, like week 5 or 6? So how much can I say?
DJ Moore is number 21 with Peach back at quarterback over Faker Mayfield and the returning Sam Darnold, who has apparently been activated from IR. Great news. Alan Lazard.
That doesn't necessarily mean they had to, or there was for the season, so that doesn't necessarily mean he's close.
Alan Lazard at 22, Gabe Davis, Deontay Johnson, Josh Palmer, assuming once again that both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are both out for the Chargers. Brandon Ayuk, Cortland Sutton, Rondell Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones at 29, and Juju Smith-Schuster at number 30. That goes into Thielen, Pickens, Mooney, Samuel, Devonta Smith, who I'm just waiting for his 12-catch, 200-yard game. It's coming soon. Just never know when. Claypool, Wendell Robinson, Michael Pittman at 38, Darius Slayton, and Jarvis Landry. At number 40, as you mentioned, Gallup, Renfro, Khalif Raymond, assuming no Josh Reynolds, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Isaiah McKenzie, Drake London, Philip Alanis Dorsett, Zay Jones, Mac Hollins, Chris Moore. Again, like no Brendan Cooks, probably. Like, is he even going to play the rest of the year?
This could be Michael Thomas of last year.
He's not even
Hmm.
hurt. He's acknowledged, not even really hurt.
Yeah, I know. They said it was his wrist. That's what I was putting in quotes. And was it 2 years ago? It was the AJ Green one where like, I'm not coming back to these Bengals. Like, you remember that? Or it was just like, I'm done. Or was it 4 years ago? Whatever it was, you know what I'm talking about. When AJ Green was like, I'm still banged up or whatever it might be. And I don't blame him for the frustration. It's just whether or not you believe that he should be out there. I don't know that he plays. I'm not going to be really that excited. Nico Collins, if he's back.
He's not playing.
You don't think so?
No.
The one thing I will say is that this might help is if Nico Collins was out there. Not that I'm super excited for him, but that Xavier McKinney, the Giants, who's been one of the best safeties in the league this year, decided to go on an ATV during his week off and is now out for 4 weeks because of that. So he's also the play caller in defense. This is a big thing for the Giants defense to lose McKinney.
I saw him put out the statement yesterday. He copied it over from like his notes on his phone, saying that he had went to Cabo, went on an excursion. You know, that's what people do when they go on vacation. Yeah. So, it's a freak injury. And I looked below and I was like, I can't wait to read like just how like angry people are at him. Giants fans were like, get better soon. We love you. I was like,
really?
This is blowing my mind. Maybe Twitter filtered out all of the negative responses, but all I saw was like, it's okay. You're playing great. We'll see you in like 3 weeks. It's like, I did not expect that.
I wouldn't have expected that either because they're 6-2? Is that what I was trying to think? Yeah, 6-2. Like I would have expected maybe if they were like 2-6, they'd be like, yeah, whatever. But I don't know. The Giants fans are nice all of a sudden. Look at that.
I guess it's just being 6-2 is just like, hey, this is great. This is house
You're playing
money.
with house money?
Yeah, playing with house money at this point. Would you move like Josh Palmer ahead of Deontay Johnson and Gabe Davis? Because I do worry against the 49ers.
Yeah, the matchup's a little bit concerning. I would play Josh Palmer over both, but I would not go higher than my boy Alan Lazard or DJ Moore or Terry McLaurin. I mean, that's as far as I would go. And I had Josh Palmer inside my top 20 last week because it's just Josh Palmer replacing Mike Williams is the role we wanted to. This is what we talked about last week. This is replacing Mike Williams. You don't want Josh Palmer replacing Keenan Allen. You want him replacing Mike Williams. And on top of that, there is neither of them out there. Speaking of not, do you think Keenan Allen plays for the rest of this year? All of a sudden, like, yeah, What the hell? How did it got worse during the bye, Keenan? And it's weird because the team's a Super Bowl contending team. Granted, they're not as good as we thought they were or hoped they were going to be. But at the same time, this is just weird. This is weird that Keenan Allen's like, yeah, I don't know. No, it got worse. I'm not feeling good.
I would say December is probably the first time that we see him, if we see him at all.
Around the same time we get Odell Beckham on the field?
Maybe. Where do you think he's going to sign?
To a contender. He's like... I don't know.
Hot take.
I don't know. I know. I just don't know if he wants to go to Green Bay because one, they're not really a contender, and two, you got to go play in Green Bay. Although he said his partying life is done. I'm paraphrasing. Although, yeah, I call me crazy, but similar to the Rams last year, I could see him going to the Dolphins as the third option.
Wow! I didn't even think about that.
You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't think like necessarily the second option is even what he really wants to be. I think he kind of wants to tag along and just be what he was last year with the Rams.
All signs point to Dallas for me.
That one makes a lot of sense too, and he's floated his Giants back and saying like, he wouldn't mind coming back, but he really want to go back.
He does not want to go to the Giants, and not because
play with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, not that he doesn't ever want to go back to the Giants. I'm sure if they were great, he would want to go there. I don't think he wants to be the receiver one catching balls from Daniel Jones.
Exactly. So yeah, I think Dallas makes sense. I think Miami's the sleeper in this whole thing.
It seems like they're off. I mean, maybe it's not, but the way that they scheme guys open, like, do we think that Beckham still has the same speed that he had? Because if you don't have speed, you can't play on that team.
No, and this is what the perfect fit for Tua is. Tua needs guys that get open quickly because that's where he's so good, and that's why you're seeing Tua with his breakout. But as the third, you don't really need that speed. You could just be the third option that does, commands a couple touchdown targets when you're in the red zone, a little respect from the defenders. I think that's more what it is. Again, we're talking about where does he want to go and who wants him. I think they're the sleeper. I agree. All signs point to Dallas. But I think Miami, for me, would be the sleeper. And hey, maybe I'm trying to think if I was gonna say maybe Baltimore, but again, I don't know. That hasn't even been floated out there though.
What do you think is a more likely scenario? Michael Pittman from this point on is a high-end receiver 3, or that he is droppable in fantasy?
High-end receiver 3. I don't think it's as good as it was 2 weeks ago for Ellinger, and I don't think it's as bad as it was this past week for Ellinger. He's in between. He's somewhere in between. Kenny Pickett, probably, like what Pickett has been to at least to this date, which means that Pittman will have some wide receiver 2 games, but then he'll have some games like he did last week. I definitely don't think he's droppable. I just think he's now in the wide receiver 3 conversation, kind of like Darnell Mooney before Justin Fields woke up.
Yeah, I don't think that Ellinger's waking up and becoming Justin Fields anytime soon.
No. But it's not as bad as it was in week 9. And yeah, I'd say the one that was far down, and I'm curious your take on this one, is I would have put, for me, I would have Mecole Hardman higher, but I wouldn't have Hardman inside my top 36 to 40 and be like, must start because of my waiver column. I didn't even include him. I actually even said Mecole Hardman, I'm not even doing this. I'm not chasing it. Yeah, he's had 3 good games in a row, but he's still 4th in route percentage. 4th, not 3rd. Marquez Valdes-Scantling still in front of him. Juju Schuster still in front of him. Tony's first game was a few plays and a little bit more mixed in, but people seem to want to grasp onto Mecole Hardman's last 3 or 4 games. I'm assuming you're not buying into that either.
No, I'm at number 61. I think that he's no different than he was in any other year the past 3 years, where he's going to have you 3 or 4 games throughout the course of the season. And you're like, oh my God, this is fantastic. He's like a top 10 receiver. And then the other games, he has 0 points. What am I doing with that?
He hasn't even reached 80 yards in a single game this year, and all his games have come with a touchdown. And I'm not going to chase. I know he's been getting them, but I'm not going to chase the touchdowns with him.
Yeah, I'm out on doing that. But he's one of those guys, again, that if you're a huge underdog and you're looking for upside, he's the type of guy that you can play if you think you're going to lose anyway, because you might get 30 points from him, but you're probably going to get 2.
Exactly. Yeah, you play him. I'd play him over Drake London. Period. At this point.
I love how much you hate Drake London. And you're probably the same guy who's like, who the Titans need back? Traylon Burks, because he's great.
No. Drake London was my favorite receiver in this draft class. I hate the Falcons offense. Put Drake London, everybody is gushing all over Garrett Wilson and how great he's been and Chris Olave. And I'm like, God, if Drake London just ended up on any other friggin' team in the league.
Let's talk quarterbacks. There's a quarterback that you wanted to mention. Do you want to mention them now, or do you want me to run through the rankings?
You can run through the rankings because he's up there, and then we can mention him.
I felt like the rankings were tough to do this week at quarterback, to be perfectly honest with you, because I don't really know what to do with Josh Allen. I'm assuming he's playing. So I went Hurts, Mahomes, Allen, Fields, Tua, Geno, Dak, Brissett, Brady, Kyler is my top 10. And then I have Herbert. The lack of weapons and him being hurt and this bad matchup is not super inspiring to me, but it's a tough week. Lawrence, Jones, Goff, Carr, Mariota, Garoppolo, Mr. Unlimited, Russell Wilson, PJ Walker, and Matt Stafford at number 20.
So it was 4. It was Justin Fields because the pushback I'm getting when I answer, I want to ask you to rank these 3, Pat, for the rest of the season, just to see where we're at this. Rank Tua, Dak, and Fields for the rest of the season.
Fields, Tua, Dak.
See, that's you're on the page that everybody. I'm Tua, Dak, Fields. I'm still putting Fields last. I love it, but the rush, he doesn't even throw for 200 yards. He has to be Ryan Tannehill and throw a touchdown, preferably 2 every single week. I just don't know that I don't think this is sustainable. I believe.
Listen, he's not going to break the rushing record every single week. My thing is that you see quarterback performance go down the later we get into the year once teams start playing in a bit colder weather. And I just think that his game translates a little bit more. You can make the argument that Dak playing inside may have an advantage there, but I don't know. I haven't loved what I've seen from Dak in terms of fantasy upside. Since he's returned, he's played more of the Cooper Rush. They've called Cooper Rush style plays. They're going to run a bunch, expect him to be efficient and get on their way and play good defense. They're not asking him to do what they used to ask him to do when they lost every game 48-45. It's a better real life scenario, but it's hurting his fantasy game.
So if you want to take him over Dak, I have no problem with that, but I'm definitively taking Tua over both of them. This is the breakout, that reason why behind Tua, and I don't think there's any reason to doubt him at this point. There's been nothing but wins and performance in fantasy to date with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle together. So I'm still taking, because Tua is sustainable to me. And yeah, he's going to have to go to Buffalo, I think.
Yeah, for first, yeah. So, and this is also the big thing too, that when I did when it spat out like the strength of schedule in the playoffs, it was really bad for Tua. It's at the Bills in week 14, at the Patriots in week 16, Packers at home in week 15. That's going to be fine. He also has an at the 49ers mixed in 3 weeks from now. So his remaining schedule isn't great. Fields is super easy. And like almost like the Dolphins, they're both in really good positions because both these defenses are so bad that it's going to force them to be on the attack the entire time. And even like we saw with Fields, it's not like, I mean, even his long touchdown was a designed run, but there are more designed runs, and then they're going to be like down by 10 in every game, and he'll just take off. I am such a sucker for this type of quarterback. And so far, over the past 5 years or so, I have always been early to rank these guys super highly and go all in. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but other times, like you have, like last year and the year before, like when Jalen Hurts first started playing, it's like you got to rank Jalen Hurts inside your top 5. Like this is just what he does every week now, and you can't overlook it.
Definitely does, but I think we also can't overlook what Tua's been doing too. And I think the Bears they get Philly and Buffalo back to back in the first week of the playoffs or the second week, is it the first week trying to get into the playoffs and then the playoffs? Either way, and they have the late bye too, which I hate. That frustrates me too with the Bears.
The Bears in the fantasy playoffs go. They're at home against Buffalo in the playoffs. Yeah, at home against the Eagles, at home against the Bills, at the Lions in your championship game. But they do go Lions, Falcons, Jets, Packers, the next 4. I guess one of those is a bye.
Oh, the Jets. Ask Andercust.
Yeah, I mean, Jets, he's legit. But they do allow quarterbacks to run on them, as we saw with Josh Allen still scored like 28 fantasy points, so that wasn't a problem.
It's true. I just think it was an interesting conversation because we had it yesterday on the Athletics show, and I said Tua over Fields, and then the Dak was the open debate. But yeah, I was just curious where you stood on that one.
I mean, I have them in back-to-back. The issue for me is that if Tua has bad games, they're going to be really bad. Whereas Fields at this point, because of this rushing floor, even if it's only 60 rushing yards per week, is just going to be so much higher. He's not going to let you down in the same way that I think Tua, if he has a bad game. Now, he hasn't had a bad game, but if he does have a bad game, will let you down because he's not running.
So he's not Rick Atlee? I can't even say it because I'm sick. No, so I'm looking at Tua. His worst game outside of the one where he got hurt. His worst game was the Buffalo one, and he's 11.4, 186-1. So I guess there's your argument there. Every single other game has been good.
No, he's been great. That's why I have him ranked at number 5. It just seems like you want to marry Tua and you hate Justin Fields. That's how I interpret this. That's the take we should have. So let's go with that. Are you okay with the rest of the should I have Lawrence? How about my Herbert at 11? Does that out of Brissett, Brady, Kyler Murray, Dak, Geno, the guys inside my top 10? I don't think there's a huge distinction between these guys, but I just worry about this Herbert matchup a lot. So this is coming from I don't have a problem with it because I'm still, even in the season, not that I admitted last year, I was too low on Justin Herbert coming out of college. I still didn't come fully around and say oh, he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Let's put him in the Hall of Fame, because I jokingly made the reference to Carson Wentz that one year when everybody was like, oh, Carson Wentz, top 5 quarterback, rest of his career. They found it. It's magic. It's wonderful. And no, I'm not calling Justin Herbert Wentz. I'm just saying we got a little too excited. The world got a little too excited of Justin Herbert for last year. And I even bought in for fantasy purposes having him as a top 5 or 6 quarterback because the weapons. But as you mentioned, it's the no Keenan Allen, the no Mike Williams. This offense has been disjointed. He's been part of the problem. He's been banged up a little bit here and there, and now it's the matchup on top of it. So I think this is more of the Justin Herbert when you don't have all the pieces around him. Not that, again, he's not as bad as Carson Wentz, but without the pieces, he's just not that top 5 quarterback in fantasy that we had last year. is having Brissett inside my top 10 at number 7, like just queuing me up for a huge letdown?
Oh, of course it is. But, I mean, it could definitely pay off because it's at Miami.
Yeah, I give me guys in these games, man. Chicago and Miami. And Detroit at home. Just although it didn't really work out last week because everyone sucked on the Packers and the Lions.
What the hell happened with that game?
I don't know, man. No one. It's not that I want to be an Aaron Rodgers defender, but like watching the game, like it's very clear his receivers don't know where to run. And that happened. That happened in the Bills game too with Dawson Knox. Like on that first pick, it's like Dawson Knox just did not run to where he was supposed to run to.
No, but wasn't even Sammy Watkins on one of those? Like, wasn't that the one where Sammy Watkins like turned around and looked at him like, "What's going on?"
There was
like is it all really the?
There was like 5 or 6 of these instances where like Rodgers. It's funny because you saw the exact opposite happen in the Washington-Minnesota game, where there was multiple times in that game where Cousins and Heineke stepped up to bomb it off like a 5-step drop, and they like had to check themselves, not throw. It's like someone got in there, was like, "No, don't." And they just like ended up checking it down or throwing it away. Like Rodgers is putting the ball on point for people. They either can't catch or they're not running towards it. It's weird.
Yeah, it definitely is. And Dallas isn't the best matchup either. So
no, not a good matchup whatsoever. Let's go to tight ends then. Where are we at for tight ends? Here we are, tight ends. Here's how much of a daze I was in last night when I was doing the rankings because I've been sick for a few days. And I just stared at it. I was like, where do because I did them before the Monday Night Football game. I was like, where do I put Mark Andrews in? Do I put him in or do I not put him in? And then I debated it with myself for like 5 minutes. Like, they're on bye. What am I doing? Like, it just some things don't click for you when you don't have full capacity. Fortunately, I feel much better now. But I go Kelsey, Goddard, Hawk on the Vikings. Here we go. Ertz, Kittle, me Timbers. Darren Waller, maybe he'll be back. Who knows? Take Schultz, David Njoku, who's expecting to play this week, at least according to him. Firemouth, Greg Dulcich, Jerry Everett, Cade Otton over in Munchkin or Munich or however they say it over there. Evan Ingram, who has a back injury. We'll see about him. Taysom Hill, Cole Kmet, Higbee, who sucks now apparently. Tanner Hudson, Kyle Pitts, Robert Tonyan, and Jawan Johnson. Even with Troutman back, he ended up scoring the touchdown. So that was nice to see. Anyone you really want to make a case for here, or are we just kind of locked into who we're playing at tight end now?
I think you're locked into who you're playing with. And then at that point, once you get past Taysom Hill and Cole Kmet, then it's just pray for a touchdown. That's just all you're doing at this point.
All right. Defense then. Philly coming in at number 1. Actually, the big favorites I really lean towards this week. So Eagles at home against Washington on Monday night. Niners Sunday night at home against the Chargers. And again, that depleted and banged up offensive line. Cowboys at the Packers, Saints at Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers, Giants at home. Even with McKinney out, I still think they're going to be fine against Houston because it's Houston. Chiefs against Jacksonville, Bears, Bills, Browns, Raiders. Then I have like Denver, Atlanta, Carolina, back-to-back, both on Thursday Night Football. Then Tennessee, Seattle, and the Rams. Any one in particular you want to make a case for, or does this smell about right to you?
I think it's about right. Tennessee, you have them in there. I think people that they're widely available, and against Denver at home, and that Tennessee defense looked really good last week for just being in that game against Kansas City the entire time. A lot of credit. That's why Derrick Henry's dapping everybody up in the locker room. Everybody's super like, why are they filming this, by the way? The Saints, you have super high, which, by the way, a lot of people didn't have. I tagged you on it, or I even mentioned you about using the opportunity a lot of time where you can drop somebody who hasn't played or pick up somebody on Monday still. And I even said, if you're looking for a defense for the next 2 weeks, you could look at the Saints, who are at Pittsburgh, and then another good matchup next week. And then the Giants are an underrated one, getting Houston, another good matchup next week too. But yeah, I think you've got all the ones in there that I was even thinking of. I don't think Las Vegas. I'd play Tennessee more than Las Vegas. I know exactly where you're going with that.
Yeah,
and you're not wrong, but
it's scary.
Put it this way: if Jonathan Taylor's back, I don't really mess with Vegas because it could be the Cleveland situation. Like they're just not even going to let Ellinger throw the ball 15 times. But if there is no Jonathan Taylor, then I would risk the Raiders where you have them.
All right, that will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience Week 10 rankings debate. Follow Jake on Twitter at AllInKid, and you can check out his rankings midnight Tuesday, or I guess, do you call it Tuesday evening or Wednesday morning? What's more accurate here?
I told you, like, to stop worrying about that. It's Wednesday morning because I put it at 12:01, so we don't have to have the whole midnight debate.
All right, so after midnight, Jake's going to let it all hang out on his rankings on theathletic.com. All right? So rate and review the show while you're here playing the Listeners League. Hit the rankings. Hit runthesims.com/Mayo. Just hit the description. There's a ton of stuff down there. Highly recommend that you go check it out. I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Fat Mayo Experience! Experience!